The plasma bolt missed Kyle Bennett's head by 3 inches. He threw Princess Zara to the ground behind the marble pillar as another volley tore through the ceremonial hall. The Kresh assassins had breached the inner palace, which meant someone on the inside had betrayed them. Kyle's combat implant fed him threat assessments faster than conscious thought. 8 hostiles, military-grade weapons, coordinated fire patterns. They weren't here to kidnap. They were here to kill. Zara's violet eyes locked onto his as he covered her body with his own. The explosions outside rattled the crystal chandeliers above them. Her 4-fingered hand gripped his arm with surprising strength. For an alien princess who stood barely 5 feet tall with translucent lavender skin, she possessed an otherworldly calm that unsettled him even now. "Stay down," Kyle barked, pulling his sidearm. The weapon felt inadequate against military hardware, but Earth's diplomats had insisted on minimal armament for protection details. Cultural sensitivity, they called it. Stupidity, Kyle thought as he counted his remaining ammunition. 42 rounds. Not enough. The Kresh warrior who rounded the pillar died with Kyle's first 3 shots. The alien's exoskeleton cracked like ceramic, green ichor spraying across the polished floor. Kyle grabbed the dead soldier's rifle without hesitation. The weapon was designed for 6-fingered hands, but humans adapted. They always did. "Kyle," Zara whispered, her voice carrying that musical quality that made human ears ache with something close to beauty. "You need to know something." Later, he growled, firing a burst that sent 2 Kresh diving for cover. The rifle's recoil was brutal, nearly dislocating his shoulder. He compensated, fired again, dropped another target. 5 left. But Zara wouldn't stop. "I chose you before the diplomatic corps assigned you. Before your government selected candidates, I saw your file among thousands and told my father I wanted the human named Kyle Bennett." A grenade clattered across the floor. Kyle didn't think. He kicked it back toward the Kresh position and pulled Zara behind a reinforced doorframe. The explosion shook the palace foundations. Screams echoed through the corridors, some human, most alien, all terrified. "Princess, with respect, this isn't the time," Kyle said, checking his ammunition counter. The rifle's display showed symbols he'd learned to read during his 2 years on Thessia Prime. 87 shots remaining. Better odds. Zara's hand touched his face, a gesture that would scandalize the Thessian court if anyone survived to gossip about it. "They're here because I chose you. The Kresh know what you are, what humans are. They fear it." Kyle processed this while his training took over. He blind-fired around the corner, forcing the remaining Kresh to reposition. The tactical overlay in his vision showed palace security converging on their location, but they were still 3 minutes out. "Lifetimes in a firefight. What I am is your guard," Kyle said flatly, "and I'm keeping you alive." He moved before she could respond, using the Thessian rifle in ways its designers never intended. Humans didn't have the Kresh's armored biology or the Thessians' telepathic coordination. What they had was spite, creativity, and a fundamental unwillingness to die according to anyone else's schedule. The firefight lasted 90 seconds. Kyle used furniture as mobile cover, fired from impossible angles, and threw a decorative statue that weighed 40 pounds like it was a baseball. He shot 1 Kresh through a tapestry, knifed another when the rifle ran dry, and beat the last one unconscious with the empty weapon. When silence finally descended, Kyle stood among the bodies, breathing hard, bleeding from a dozen minor cuts. Zara emerged from behind the pillar, somehow untouched, somehow still composed. Palace guards flooded the hall, their weapons trained on everything that moved. Kyle raised his hands slowly, letting the rifle clatter to the floor. The guard captain, a Thessian named Vorn, stared at the carnage with all three of his eyes wide. 7 Kresh military operators, Vorn said slowly. You killed 7 Kresh military operators, alone, with their own weapon. Kyle shrugged, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. 6. One's still breathing. Zara stepped forward, and every Thessian in the room immediately knelt. She spoke in their language, her voice carrying absolute authority. When she finished, she turned to Kyle. Come with me, she said. Now you need to hear the truth. Kyle followed, his training screaming warnings his body was too exhausted to heed. They walked through corridors he'd never seen, descending into sections of the palace that weren't on any map he'd studied. The guards didn't follow. Nobody followed. That should have terrified him. They entered a chamber that hummed with technology far beyond anything the Thessian Confederacy admitted to possessing. Holographic displays showed star maps, fleet movements, and data streams Kyle couldn't begin to interpret. Sit, Zara commanded, and Kyle's legs obeyed before his mind caught up. She stood before him, no longer the delicate princess who needed protection. Her posture changed, her presence expanded, and Kyle suddenly understood he'd been playing a role in a game whose rules he'd never known. I told you I chose you, Zara said. Let me tell you why. 50 cycles ago, before you were born, my father's researchers discovered something that terrified the Thessian High Council. They found humanity's war history. Kyle said nothing. What could he say? We've fought the Kresh for 3,000 years, Zara continued, a stalemate that consumes resources and lives with no end in sight. Then we discovered Earth. A species that went from primitive flight to splitting the atom in 40 years. A species that survived 2 global wars and built weapons capable of destroying their own planet before they even reached their nearest moon. She pulled up a hologram. Kyle recognized the images. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the scarred face of human history. The Kresh discovered this too, Zara said quietly. And they understood what we understood. Humans aren't just creative or adaptable. You're terrifyingly efficient at ending things, at winning, no matter the cost. So you wanted a weapon? Kyle said, his voice hollow. No, Zara replied, and her hand touched his again. I wanted hope. Part 2 begins tomorrow, she'd said. But Kyle's handler called before dawn. The debriefing room was sterile and cold, designed to make people uncomfortable. Kyle sat across from Agent Frank Morrison, a career diplomat who'd never fired a weapon in anger and treated those who had like interesting animals. You caused quite an incident, Morrison said, reviewing data on his tablet. Kyle's shoulder throbbed where the medics had sealed the plasma burn. I kept the princess alive. You killed 7 Kresh nationals on Thessian soil during a diplomatic summit. Do you understand the political ramifications? I understand they were trying to murder my protectee. Morrison set down the tablet and looked at Kyle properly for the first time. His expression carried something between pity and calculation. The Kresh government claims they were rogue elements. The Thessian Confederacy is accepting that explanation to avoid war. You're being commended publicly and reassigned quietly. Reassigned where? Earth. Effective immediately. Your contract is terminated. You're going home. Kyle had expected this. Protection details who killed people, even in legitimate defense, became liabilities. The political machine demanded blood, and his career was cheaper than war. He'd made peace with it during the long night while Zara was questioned by her father's council. Except Zara had other plans. She appeared in the doorway like a purple ghost, her official robes making her seem even smaller. Morrison shot to his feet, stammering diplomatic pleasantries. Zara ignored him entirely. You will not reassign Kyle Bennett, she said. her voice carrying harmonics that made Morrison's hands shake. "He remains in my service by my authority. This is not negotiable." Morrison's face went through several colors. "Your Highness, with all due respect, that's not how diplomatic protocols work. We can assign another guard, someone more suitable for your needs." "No," Zara said simply. "Kyle or no one, choose." The silence stretched. Kyle watched Morrison calculate the political mathematics. Earth needed Tessia's technology, their trade routes, their alliance against the Kresh. One human guard wasn't worth endangering that relationship. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," Morrison finally said. "Consult quickly," Zara replied. "Kyle and I have an appointment." She left without waiting for permission, and Kyle followed because he'd learned that Zara's requests were really commands wrapped in courtesy. They walked through the palace gardens where alien flowers bloomed in colors that made human eyes water. "You didn't have to do that," Kyle said. "Yes, I did." "Why?" "Get another guard. Someone who won't cause diplomatic incidents." Zara stopped beneath something that resembled a willow tree if willows glowed blue and hummed with bioluminescence. She turned to face him, and her expression carried a weight that made Kyle's chest tighten. "Last night I told you I chose you. I didn't explain fully because we were busy not dying. Now you deserve the complete truth." Kyle waited. Around them, palace staff gave them privacy, probably on orders. Everything here happened on orders, he'd learned. Except maybe Zara herself. 3 years ago, my father's intelligence division intercepted a Kresh battle plan. They intended to deploy a biological weapon that would sterilize Thessian worlds. Not kill us outright, that would be too quick. Prevent us from reproducing. Let us die slowly over generations while they inherited our territory. Kyle's stomach turned. He'd seen war's cruelty, but genocide conducted in slow motion carried a particular horror. "We had no counters," Zara continued. "Our science couldn't match it. Our military couldn't stop it. We were preparing evacuation plans, trying to save what population we could before the Kresh struck. Then someone suggested we look to our newest allies, humanity." "We didn't have anything," Kyle protested. "We're barely 50 years past first contact." "Our technology is primitive compared to yours. Your technology is. Your thinking isn't." Zara pulled up a holographic display from her wrist device. Images of human scientists flashed past, their names mostly Western, but representing every continent. "We showed your biochemist the Kresh weapon. They studied it for 6 months. Then they found 17 different ways to neutralize it, using what you call basic chemistry." Kyle stared at the display. He recognized some of the names: Nobel Prize winners, people who'd cured diseases Earth's governments had declared incurable. Humans spent 10,000 years fighting microscopic enemies you couldn't see, Zara explained. Plagues, bacteria, viruses. You evolved an entire scientific discipline around understanding and defeating biological threats. The Kresh thought they'd invented an unstoppable weapon. Your scientists called it unsophisticated. "So Earth saved Thessia," Kyle said slowly, "and nobody knows. My father's council decided the information was too dangerous. If the Kresh knew we had a counter, they'd develop something worse. If our own population knew how close we came to extinction, it would cause panic. Only the highest levels of government on both our worlds know the truth. And you're telling me, because?" Zara's four-fingered hand gestured at the garden around them. "Because I spent 2 years reviewing the files of every human who contributed to saving my species. Scientists, yes, but also the soldiers who kept them safe, the diplomats who maintained the alliance, the regular humans who did extraordinary things, because that's what you do when pushed. She pulled up another hologram. Kyle saw his own face, younger, sterner. His military record. The missions Earth had redacted. The commendations buried under classified stamps. You fought in the resource wars, Zara said. 16 combat deployments. 3 times your unit was ambushed with superior numbers and equipment. 3 times you brought your people home alive. You didn't follow doctrine. You improvised, adapted, did whatever was necessary to win. Kyle's jaw clenched. That's called survival, not heroism. To you, perhaps. To me, it's proof of what makes humans different. Zara closed the hologram. The Kresh are stronger. The Thessians are smarter. The Vatari have better technology. But humans are the only species in the known galaxy who've gone from primitive hunter-gatherers to spacefaring civilization in less than 200,000 years. You don't just survive. You conquer, adapt, transform everything you touch. You're romanticizing us, Kyle said. We're not special. We're just stubborn. Stubborn, Zara repeated, a smile touching her alien features. Yes, that's exactly what I need. She stepped closer. Close enough that Kyle could smell the strange floral scent that the Seans produced naturally. The Kresh who attacked yesterday weren't rogue elements. They were sanctioned by a faction of the Kresh military that's discovered what I just told you. They know humans are the reason their bioweapon failed. They see your species as an existential threat. So they're trying to kill you because you have a human guard? They're trying to kill me because I'm the strongest voice in the Confederacy arguing for deeper integration with humanity. My father is old, Kyle. In 10 years, maybe less, I'll be Empress. And when I am, I intend to propose full alliance, technology sharing, military integration, combining what Thessia has with what humanity can do. Kyle's mind raced through the implications. Earth gaining access to faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, medical technology that could extend human lifespans by centuries. It would catapult humanity into the galactic powers overnight. The Kresh can't allow that, Kyle said. No. Neither can several Thessian factions who see humans as dangerous upstarts. Neither can the Vatari Trade Consortium that profits from humanity's technological dependence. Zara's eyes met his. I have enemies everywhere, Kyle. I need a guard who doesn't just follow protocol. I need someone who'll do whatever it takes to keep me alive long enough to change the galaxy. You need a human, Kyle said, understanding clicking into place. I need you specifically. Because I reviewed 100,000 files and yours was the only one that made me think I might actually survive what's coming. Kyle looked at the alien princess who'd somehow seen something in his classified military record that even he didn't recognize. What exactly is coming, War? Zara said simply. Not the contained skirmishes we've fought for millennia. Real war. Total war. The kind humans understand intimately. She pulled up one final hologram. It showed fleet movements, political alignments, resource allocations. Kyle had enough military training to recognize preparation for major conflict when he saw it. The Kresh are mobilizing, Zara explained. They're building alliances with species that share their fear of humanity. Within 2 years, they'll have enough support to launch a full invasion of Thessian space. They'll claim we violated treaty terms by developing weapons of mass destruction. They'll kite our alliance with Earth as proof we're dangerous. Are they wrong? Kyle asked quietly. Zara's smile was sad. No, we are dangerous now, thanks to you. They stood in silence while the weight of galactic politics settled around them. Kyle had joined the diplomatic corps to escape war, to do something meaningful without the carnage. Now he was standing at the center of a conflict that could consume hundreds of worlds. "So, what do you need from me?" he finally asked. "Right now, I need you to stay alive and keep me alive. Tomorrow, I'll need more." Zara's expression hardened. "The Kresh will try again. They have agents everywhere, some in this palace. I need a guard who can identify threats my own people miss. Someone who thinks like an enemy instead of a diplomat." "You want me to be paranoid?" "I want you to be human," Zara corrected. "Your species survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and your own genocidal tendencies. You're still here because you never trusted peace to last, and you never stopped preparing for the next threat." She wasn't wrong. Kyle's training emphasized worst-case scenarios. Human military doctrine assumed everything would go wrong simultaneously. It was what made them effective, and what gave them a reputation for ruthlessness among more optimistic species. "I'll need access," Kyle said, his mind already running scenarios. "Real access. Security protocols, palace layouts, staff files. If I'm identifying internal threats, I can't be locked out of information. Done. And I'll need weapons, real ones, not ceremonial sidearms, already arranged. My father's guards are horrified, but they'll comply." Kyle studied Zara's face, trying to read alien expressions he'd spent 2 years learning to interpret. She looked determined, exhausted, and something else. Hopeful, maybe. It was hard to tell with purple skin and eyes that reflected light differently than human ones. "Why tell me all this?" he asked. "You could have just kept me assigned and let me do my job without knowing the bigger picture." "Because the humans I studied all shared one trait," Zara said. "They fought harder when they understood what they were fighting for. Not just survival. Purpose. You needed to know this isn't about protecting one alien princess. It's about preventing a war that could kill billions." "No pressure," Kyle muttered. Zara's laugh sounded like wind chimes. "You already handled the pressure yesterday. You killed 7 trained soldiers in 90 seconds using their own weapon. Do you know what my security analysis showed? The Kresh planned that assault for 3 months. They studied your patterns, exploited security gaps, timed their attack perfectly. They expected to complete their mission in under 2 minutes. But, humans don't care about enemy plans. You adapted faster than their tactics could account for. That's what I need." Morrison found them an hour later, his expression pinched. "The Confederacy has formally requested that Kyle Bennett remain assigned to Princess Zara. My government has agreed. Congratulations, you're stuck in the middle of alien politics." Kyle didn't miss the resentment in Morrison's voice. Career diplomats hated when muscle got attention. "Understood," Kyle said neutrally. Morrison left, and Zara gave Kyle a look that was definitely amusement. "He's threatened by you. Most people are threatened by something they don't understand." "Yes," Zara agreed, "which is why the Kresh want me dead." The next 4 days passed in a blur of security arrangements and political theater. Kyle sat through meetings with Thessian intelligence officers who barely concealed their skepticism about human capabilities. He memorized palace layouts until he could navigate blindfolded. He reviewed files on every staff member, looking for patterns, connections, anything that suggested a leak. And every night, he stood outside Zara's chambers while she worked until dawn, preparing for the summit that would determine whether the Confederacy's alliance with Earth survived. The Votari delegation arrived on the 5th day. They came in ships that made Thessian vessels look like children's toys. Sleek, massive, radiating power. The Votari were the merchant princes of the galaxy, controlling trade routes that connected 1,000 worlds. They'd tolerated Earth's entry into galactic commerce but watched humanity's rapid technological advancement with obvious concern. Kyle stood 3 steps behind Zara during the formal reception. The Vatari ambassador was a creature that resembled a cross between an octopus and a crystal formation, its tentacles ending in delicate manipulators that could perform surgery or strangle equally well. "Princess Zara," the ambassador said through its translator, "your father's invitation honors us. Ambassador Chkstal, welcome to Thessia Prime." The pleasantries continued while Kyle's combat implant cataloged threat assessments. 17 Votari guards, all armed with weapons that were technically ceremonial but could definitely kill. 8 Thessian security personnel who seemed more focused on impressing the visitors than protecting their princess. And Kyle, alone, watching everything. The banquet that night was spectacular and meaningless. Politicians from a dozen species made speeches about cooperation while plotting to undermine each other. Kyle stood against the wall, refusing food, tracking movement patterns. That's when he noticed the server. Nothing obvious, just a Thessian in staff livery, carrying drinks invisible in the way good servants are. But his movement pattern was wrong, too deliberate. He was positioning himself with clear sight lines to Zara's table. Kyle's hand moved to his weapon, a human-made pistol that fit his grip perfectly. He caught Vorn's eye across the room and made a subtle gesture. The guard captain nodded imperceptibly. The server reached into his coat. Kyle was moving before conscious thought finished processing. He covered the distance in 3 seconds, knocking aside a Votari delegate, vaulting over a table. The server pulled a weapon that looked like a cylinder no bigger than a pen. Kyle tackled him before he could aim. They hit the ground hard. The server was stronger than expected, enhanced musculature that let him throw Kyle partially off. The cylinder clattered across the floor. Kyle saw it roll toward a group of diplomats and felt ice in his veins. "Bomb!" he shouted. "Everyone out!" Chaos erupted. Kyle fought the server with brutal efficiency, using techniques no Thessian combatant would expect. Elbow to throat, knee to groin, alien anatomy be damned. The server gasped and went limp. Kyle grabbed the cylinder and ran, not toward the exits where everyone was fleeing, toward the balcony. He had 5 seconds, maybe 10, before the device activated. Not enough time to disarm it, only one option. He threw it with everything he had. The cylinder arced through the night sky and exploded 200 feet above the palace gardens. The blast was contained, beautiful even, a sphere of blue light that dissipated quickly. If it had gone off in the banquet hall, everyone would have died. Kyle sagged against the balcony railing, breathing hard. Behind him, he heard weapons being drawn, security finally responding. Someone grabbed his arm roughly. "Stand down!" Zara's voice cut through the confusion. "He just saved all of us." The investigation took hours. The server was enhanced, as Kyle suspected, hired by unknown elements but funded by accounts traced to Kresh territory. The bomb was Vatari technology, stolen or purchased on black markets, a deliberate attempt to frame the Vatari for assassination and trigger war. Kyle sat in Zara's private chambers while she argued with her father via holographic communication. Emperor Tarn looked ancient and tired, his 3 eyes showing the weight of ruling a civilization locked in eternal conflict. "This proves nothing," Tarn said. "The Kresh will deny involvement. The Votari will demand apologies. We gain nothing but more enemies. We gain proof that Kyle Bennett's instincts are better than our entire security apparatus," Zara countered. "Father, I need him officially appointed as my primary guard, not attached to the human embassy. Mine? That sets dangerous precedents. Other houses will demand human protectors. We'll look weak, dependent on a species barely 50 years spacefaring. We are dependent on them, we just haven't admitted it publicly. Kyle watched the alien princess argue with her emperor father. She was magnificent, he realized, not despite her youth, but because of it. She saw clearly what older, more cautious minds refused to acknowledge. "Very well," Tharn finally said, "but understand, daughter. You're tying our fate to humanity's. If they fail us, if they prove as dangerous as the Kresh claim, it will be on your head." "I know," Zara said simply. When the hologram faded, Zara turned to Kyle. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be difficult." "What happens tomorrow?" "The summit continues. The Votari are furious. The Kresh are making speeches about violence and instability, and you become officially the first human to serve in the Theshan Imperial Guard." Kyle processed this. "That's going to make me a target." "Yes," Zara agreed. "But you already were. Now at least it's official." She walked to the window overlooking the city. Thessia's capital sprawled beneath them, millions of lives going about their business, unaware how close they'd come to political catastrophe. "I meant what I said," Zara said quietly. "I chose you. Not randomly. I spent months reviewing human records. You know what made yours stand out? My charming personality?" She smiled. "You've never left anyone behind. Every mission, every deployment, you brought your people home. Even when ordered to abandon positions, even when retreat was the logical choice, you found ways to save everyone." Kyle's throat tightened. "I lost people. Good people. I know. I read every after-action report. But you tried. Every time. The survival rate for units you commanded was 40% higher than human military average. You didn't just complete missions. You protected your people. That's what a leader does." "No," Zara said, turning to face him. "That's what a human does. You make survival personal. You refuse to accept loss. It's why my father's scientist reached out to human biochemists. It's why you threw that bomb off a balcony instead of trying to survive its blast. It's why I need you." Kyle met her alien eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. Trust. Complete, absolute trust from a being whose species measured civilization in millennia, while humans were still learning to reliably leave their own planet. "I won't let you down," he said. "I know," Zara replied. "That's why I chose you." The Kresh delegation arrived the next morning with enough military escort to constitute an invasion force. Ambassador Vraxis was an 8-foot-tall reptilian, with scales like armor plating and eyes that tracked movement with predatory precision. Kyle stood at Zara's side during the formal reception, wearing the ceremonial armor of an Imperial Guard and feeling like an imposter among Thessians who'd trained for decades. Vraxis stared at Kyle with open contempt. "So this is the human who disrupted last night's banquet. How interesting that Princess Zara feels the need for such crude protection." "Ambassador Vraxis," Zara said smoothly, "your concern for my safety is noted. Shall we discuss trade agreements, or would you prefer to continue commenting on my security arrangements?" The barb landed perfectly. Vraxis's scaled face showed nothing but his tail twitched. A Kresh Tel Kyle had learned to recognize irritation. The negotiations were brutal. The Kresh wanted access to Theshan technology. The Thessians wanted guarantees about territorial borders. Everyone wanted concessions nobody was willing to give. Kyle stood silently, watching, learning how galactic politics was just war conducted with words instead of weapons. During a recess, Vraxis approached Zara directly. Kyle's hand moved instinctively to his weapon. "Princess," Vraxis said, ignoring Kyle entirely, "may I speak candidly?" "You may speak," Zara replied, not promising candor would be reciprocated. Your alliance with humanity concerns many in the Confederacy. Humans are unpredictable, violent, barely controlled. Bringing one into the Imperial Guard sends a troubling message. What message would that be? That you no longer trust your own people to protect you. That you believe human methods are superior to Thessian traditions. Zara smiled, and Kyle recognized the expression. She was about to say something that would be perfectly diplomatic and utterly devastating. Ambassador, I trust my people completely. I also recognize that humans bring capabilities we lack. Combining our strengths makes us all safer. Unless you believe the Kresh Empire fears human involvement in Thessian affairs, Vrax's tail lashed. The Kresh Empire fears nothing. Then you have no objection to my security arrangements? The ambassador left, radiating barely controlled fury. Kyle waited until they were alone before speaking. You're baiting him. Yes, that's dangerous. Also, yes. Zara pulled up her datapad, reviewing notes for the afternoon session. But necessary. The Kresh respect strength. If I show weakness, they'll exploit it. If I show confidence, they'll be cautious. And if they attack again, then you'll stop them. She said it with such certainty that Kyle almost believed it himself. The afternoon negotiations were interrupted by an explosion 3 blocks from the palace. Kyle had Zara on the ground and covered before the sound finished echoing. Security burst into the room, weapons drawn, chaos erupting. Reports coming in, Vorn said, his translator making his rapid Thessian comprehensible. Bombing at transport hub. 17 dead, 60 injured. Vraxus stood slowly, his expression unreadable. How tragic. It seems Thessia Prime has a security problem. Kyle wanted to shoot him. The smug certainty in the Kresh ambassador's voice made it obvious he knew more than he was saying. But shooting ambassadors started wars, and Kyle was already pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior for a guard. We should postpone negotiations, Vraxus continued, until Thessian authorities can guarantee safety. No, Zara said, standing. Kyle tried to pull her back down, but she resisted. We continue. I will not allow terrorists to dictate policy. Noble, Vraxus said, but foolish. How many more need to die before you admit humans cannot protect you? There it was. The calculated provocation. Kyle's combat implant highlighted micro-expressions. Vraxus was testing them, pushing to see if Zara would crack. The bombing used Kresh explosives, Zara said calmly. My intelligence services identified the signature within minutes. Would you like to explain how terrorists acquired military-grade Kresh ordnance? Vraxus's pupils contracted. Just slightly, just enough. Black markets exist everywhere. We cannot be held responsible for stolen equipment. Of course not. Just as I cannot be held responsible for my guard's tendency to shoot first when threatened. Zara's smile was sharp. Negotiations continue in 1 hour. I suggest everyone use that time to reconsider their positions. She walked out, and Kyle followed, his mind racing. The bombing wasn't random. It was coordinated with Vraxus's arrival, timed to maximize political impact. The Kresh were escalating. They're going to try again, Kyle said once they were secure in Zara's office. I know. I can't stop every attack. Not if they're willing to sacrifice civilians. I know that too. Zara pulled up holographic displays showing the bombing aftermath. Bodies covered in sheets. Medics treating the wounded. The ugly reality of political violence. This is what happens when I push for change. People die. You didn't kill them. The Kresh did. Did they? Or did I by refusing to maintain the status quo? Her voice cracked slightly. Maybe my father is right. Maybe I'm too young, too idealistic, too human influenced to lead. Kyle made a decision that would probably get him fired or worse. He grabbed Zara's shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. The Kresh are bombing civilians because they're desperate. They know if you succeed in integrating humanity into the Confederacy, they lose their military advantage. They're trying to break you before that happens. Don't let them. How do I not let them? How do I justify more deaths? By making sure they mean something. Those people died because someone wants to preserve a system where the Kresh can develop bioweapons and nobody can stop them. They died because some species think humanity doesn't belong in the galaxy. You want to honor them? Finish what you started. Zara stared at him, her alien eyes unreadable. Then she straightened, shrugged off his hands, and became the princess again. You're right, we continue. The negotiations resumed. Vraxes made demands, Zara countered. Other delegations watched the dance, calculating which side to support. Kyle stood at attention watching everything, trusting nothing. The attack came at midnight. Kyle's implant woke him from light sleep with threat warnings. Motion sensors in the palace corridors showing movement patterns that didn't match security patrols. He was armed and moving before his conscious mind fully engaged. The first attacker died silently. Kyle's blade through his throat before he could sound an alarm. The second got off a shot that scorched the wall inches from Kyle's head. Kyle's return fire was more accurate. He fought through the palace corridors using every dirty trick human military training had taught him. He used darkness, rigged improvised traps, played dead once to ambush an overconfident attacker. By the time he reached Zara's chambers, he'd killed 6 hostiles and collected enough wounds to make him lightheaded. Zara was awake, armed with a Theshan energy weapon covering the door. She saw Kyle and lowered her weapon fractionally. How many? She asked. I counted 8. Killed 6. 2 unaccounted for. As if on cue, the door exploded inward. The next 10 seconds were pure chaos. Kyle and Zara fired simultaneously, driving the attackers back. One went down. The other, larger, armored, kept coming. Kyle recognized Kresh military-grade combat armor, personal shields, enhanced strength, built-in weapon systems. He was outmatched and knew it. Kyle threw himself at the armored Kresh anyway, because that's what humans did. They fought impossible odds and refused to accept defeat until physically unable to continue. The Kresh swatted him aside like an annoying insect. Kyle hit the wall hard enough to crack ribs. Through the pain, he saw the Kresh raising a weapon toward Zara. Kyle threw his pistol. It was a stupid move. Pistols weren't designed to be thrown, but the Kresh's shield was calibrated for energy weapons, not kinetic impacts. The heavy weapon hit the alien's helmet hard enough to crack the faceplate. Zara didn't hesitate. Her energy weapon burned through the gap Kyle created. The Kresh collapsed, his armor smoking. Palace security arrived seconds later. Too late to matter. They found Kyle bleeding on the floor, Zara standing over him with her weapon still raised, and 7 dead attackers scattered through her chambers. "Get him to medical," Zara commanded. "Now." Kyle woke in the Palace Medical Center surrounded by technology that made human hospitals look medieval. A Theshian doctor with 4 arms was examining readouts Kyle couldn't begin to interpret. "You'll live," the doctor said in accented but clear English, "though why you humans insist on accumulating injuries is beyond me. Your species has excellent pain tolerance and terrible damage mitigation." Kyle laughed, which hurt. "That about sums us up." Zara appeared in the doorway. She'd changed clothes but looked exhausted. Can I speak with him? The doctor gestured permission and left. Zara sat in the chair beside Kyle's medical pod. 7 attacks in 3 days, she said without preamble. The Kresh are making their position clear. If I continue pushing for human integration, they'll continue killing people until I stop, or I'm dead. So what do? I'm giving a speech tomorrow, broadcast across the Confederacy. My father thinks I'm insane, but he's not stopping me. Her 4-fingered hand found Kyle's. I'm going to tell them everything. The bioweapon, the human solution. Why we need Earth's help. All of it. Kyle's combat implant, even dulled by medication, recognized the danger. That will force the Kresh to escalate. No more covert attacks, open war. I know, but it also forces the rest of the Confederacy to choose sides. Right now, they can pretend ignorance. After tomorrow, they'll have to decide if they're with us or against us. That's a hell of a gamble. Zara squeezed his hand. It's the only move left. I learned it from studying human military history. Sometimes you have to force the battle when you're ready, rather than waiting for the enemy to strike when you're weak. And are we ready? We have you, Zara said simply. The human who killed 7 attackers in 3 minutes while protecting someone he barely knew 3 days ago. The human who threw a pistol at an armored Kresh soldier because it was the only weapon he had left. I'd say we're as ready as we'll ever be. Kyle wanted to argue, to tell her she was putting too much faith in one human guard, but looking at her determined expression, he realized that wasn't the point. Zara didn't need him to be superhuman. She needed him to be human, to bring that particular brand of stubborn creativity to impossible situations. Okay, he said, let's change the galaxy. Zara smiled, and Kyle understood why he'd accepted this assignment. Why he'd stayed when he could have requested reassignment. It wasn't about politics or galactic alliances. It was about a young princess trying to save her people and choosing to trust a species barely 50 years spacefaring to help her do it. One question, Kyle said. You told me you chose me before the diplomatic corps assigned me. How exactly did you arrange that? Zara's smile turned mischievous. I may have used my father's intelligence network to flag your file in the human selection database, and suggested to certain Earth officials that assigning you would demonstrate commitment to the Alliance, and possibly implied that rejecting my request would be interpreted as an insult to the royal house. You manipulated 2 governments to get me assigned. I prefer to think of it as diplomatic engineering. Kyle laughed despite his injuries. You're terrifying? You know that? Good, Zara said, standing. Terror keeps people off balance. Rest now. Tomorrow, everything changes. She left, and Kyle stared at the ceiling of the alien medical bay, contemplating how his life had somehow become the hinge point for galactic politics. He'd joined the service to make a difference. He just hadn't expected the difference to be measured in the fate of civilizations. The medical staff kept him sedated for the next 12 hours. When he woke, Zara was already at the podium, broadcasting to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Kyle watched on the medical center's display. Zara stood alone on a stage, no guards visible, projecting strength and vulnerability simultaneously. Citizens of the Confederacy, she began, I speak to you today about fear, hope, and the choice before us. The bioweapon, the human scientists, the attacks, the Kresh's desperation. She spoke clearly, calmly, making the case for humanity's inclusion not as a favor, but as survival necessity. Call humans dangerous, Zara said. They're right. Humans are dangerous the same way medicine is dangerous to disease, the way knowledge is dangerous to ignorance. They threaten the comfortable certainty that we've peaked, that our current state is as good as we'll ever be. Kyle watched the real-time reaction feeds. Some species were outraged, others intrigued. The Kresh delegation was already filing official protests. The Votari were silent, calculating. I stand here today with a human guard, Zara continued. Kyle Bennett, who has saved my life 3 times in the past week, he's not Theshian. He doesn't have our history, our traditions, our understanding of proper behavior. What he has is something we've forgotten. The absolute refusal to accept defeat. The creativity to find solutions we've overlooked. The courage to fight when fighting seems futile. Kyle's medical display lit up with communication requests. Morrison demanding to know why Kyle hadn't warned Earth about this speech. Other humans from the embassy, confused and concerned, ignored them all. The Kresh Empire wants you to fear humanity, Zara said. I'm asking you to do something harder. Partner with them. Learn from them. Let them learn from us. Build something stronger than either species could create alone. She paused, and Kyle saw her gather herself for the final statement. To the Kresh and anyone else who thinks violence will stop this alliance, I say this clearly. The attacks will not work. The threats will not work. You can kill me, but my successor will continue this path. You can attack human interests, but you'll only prove why we need their defensive capabilities. The future is coming whether you want it or not. Choose to be part of it or be left behind. The broadcast ended. Within minutes, the palace was in lockdown. Threat warnings flooded security networks. The Kresh recalled their ambassador. 3 species announced they were withdrawing from the Confederacy. 7 others pledged support for Zara's position. Kyle's doctor declared him fit enough to resume duty. Kyle armed himself with weapons that would make human military commanders jealous and took his position outside Zara's office. She was on communication with what seemed like every leader in the Confederacy. Emperor Tharn looked simultaneously proud and terrified. Other Theshian nobles were demanding Zara's removal from succession. The chaos was comprehensive and complete. When she finally emerged 6 hours later, Zara looked exhausted but satisfied. Well, she said to Kyle, that happened. You just destabilized the entire galactic political order? I accelerated the inevitable. The Kresh would have attacked eventually. The Confederacy would have fractured. Better to control when it happens than wait for the enemy to choose. That's very human thinking, Kyle observed. I learned from the best. She smiled at him. My father wants to see us, both of us. Emperor Tharn's private chambers were less intimidating than Kyle expected. The monarch who'd ruled for 3 centuries sat in a simple chair, looking ancient and weary. Kyle Bennett, Tharn said. My daughter speaks highly of you. Tell me, does your species always cause this much chaos wherever you go? Usually, sir, Kyle replied honestly. We call it progress. Tarn's laugh was bitter. Progress, yes. Zara believes humanity represents our future. I believe you represent the end of everything we've built. Father, Zara started. But Tarn raised a hand. I'm not finished. You represent the end of our isolation, our certainty, our comfortable stagnation, and perhaps that's what we need. The Kresh nearly destroyed us. We needed humans to save us. That fact terrifies me because it means we're no longer the advanced civilization guiding younger species. We're equals, maybe less than equals in some ways. Tharn stood, his 3 eyes focusing on Kyle with unsettling intensity. But my daughter is right about one thing. The galaxy is changing. Species that don't adapt will die. So I'm making you an offer, human. Stay with Zara. Protect her. Teach her everything your species knows about survival against impossible odds. And when she becomes Empress, help her transform the Confederacy into something that can survive what's coming. What's coming, sir? War. Real war. Not the contained skirmishes we've managed for millennia. The creche will see Zara's speech as declaration of hostilities. Other species will choose sides. Within a year, maybe two, we'll be fighting for survival. Kyle thought about refusing, walking away from galactic politics and returning to Earth where the worst he'd face was Earthbound conflicts. Then he looked at Zara standing beside her father's throne, young and determined and trusting him with her life and the future of her species. "I'll stay," Kyle said, "on one condition." "Name it," Tharn said. "Earth gets full access to Confederacy technology. Medical, energy, propulsion, everything. If we're risking human lives to protect Theshan interests, we deserve equal partnership." Tharn's expression was unreadable. "You bargain like a merchant, not a soldier." "I bargain like a human," Kyle corrected. "We don't do anything halfway." "Done. I'll begin negotiations with your government immediately." Tarn turned to Zara. "He's impertinent, aggressive, and completely unsuitable for polite society. You chose well." Over the next month, the galaxy reorganized itself around the new reality Zara's speech created. The creche formed a military coalition with species that feared human expansion. The Confederacy strengthened ties with Earth, beginning technology transfers that would catapult humanity forward by centuries. Political alliances shifted like sand, and Kyle Bennett, former soldier turned diplomatic protection, found himself training a new generation of guards, humans and Theshans working together, combining human adaptability with alien technology. The attacks continued, but less frequently. The creche were regrouping, preparing for something larger. Intelligence suggested major fleet movements toward Confederacy borders. "They're coming," Zara said one evening, reviewing tactical displays in her office. She'd been promoted to Commander of Home Defense, a position that put her at the center of military planning. "My sources say 2 months, maybe 3, before the creche launched their invasion." Kyle studied the star maps. Hundreds of worlds, billions of lives, all depending on decisions being made in rooms like this. "Are we ready? Are we ever?" Zara smiled sadly. "I dragged humanity into this. I convinced my father to bet our civilization on partnership with a species we barely understand. Either I'm brilliant or catastrophically wrong." "You're brilliant," Kyle said. "Catastrophically brilliant." She laughed, and Kyle realized how much their dynamic had shifted over the past month. She wasn't just his protectee anymore. She was his partner, his friend, someone he'd die to protect, not because of duty, but because of choice. "You know what the strangest part is?" Zara said. "I read your file. I knew your capabilities, your record, your psychological profile, but I didn't expect to actually like you." "That's because my file doesn't mention my sparkling personality. It mentioned you have severe trust issues, difficulty with authority, and a tendency toward sarcasm when stressed. I thought those would be problems. And instead they're exactly what I needed. Someone who questions everything, who doesn't accept status quo, who uses humor to process trauma." Zara met his eyes. Someone who chose to stay not because of duty, but because they believed in what we're doing. Kyle felt something shift in his chest. The professional distance he maintained, the walls he'd built during years of combat and loss, all of it cracking under the weight of Zara's honesty. "I did choose," he said quietly. "The moment you told me about the bioweapon, about wanting to save your people, I chose. Everything after was just details." "Then I chose well," Zara said. when I picked you long before they sent you." They stood in comfortable silence while the galaxy's political machinery ground forward around them. Wars brewing, alliances forming, the future uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. Kyle's communication device chimed. Morrison asking for immediate meeting at the human embassy. Kyle showed the message to Zara, who nodded. "Go." He probably wants to yell at you for teaching humans and Thessians together. Apparently, some Earth officials think we're corrupting their soldiers. Are we? Absolutely, but in productive ways. Kyle took a transport to the human embassy. Morrison looked apoplectic, his face red with either anger or blood pressure issues. Several other Earth officials sat around the conference table, all looking varying degrees of concern. "Sit down, Bennett," Morrison snapped. Kyle sat, keeping his expression neutral. Years of military discipline made dealing with annoyed bureaucrats almost easy. "I'll be direct," Morrison said. "Several people in Earth's government believe you've gone native, that you're prioritizing Thessian interests over human ones, that your loyalty is compromised. Is that what you think?" Kyle asked. "What I think is irrelevant. I'm being pressured to recommend your replacement. Someone less personally invested in the princess's survival." Kyle felt cold anger settle into his bones. "Less invested in preventing war, you mean?" "The Kresh are offering Earth a deal," another official said. Her nameplate read, "Director Chen, Intelligence Division. Neutrality in the coming conflict in exchange for technology sharing. They're positioning this as humanity's chance to avoid galactic war by abandoning the Thessians who saved Earth from bioweapon development," Kyle said flatly. "The Thessians didn't save Earth. We saved them. And they've been sharing technology, resources, and intelligence ever since. That deal the Kresh are offering? It's a trap. Once the Confederacy falls, humanity will be next. The Kresh fear us. They'll eliminate the threat." "That's speculation," Director Chen said. "That's strategy. I've read Kresh military doctrine. They don't leave potential enemies alive." Kyle leaned forward. "You want to recall me? Fine. Send someone else to watch Princess Zara die when the Kresh attack. But understand that her death means the Alliance collapses, Earth loses its technology pipeline, and humanity faces galactic politics alone." Morrison and Chen exchanged glances. They hadn't expected him to call their bluff. "Nobody said anything about recalling you," Morrison said carefully. "We're simply concerned about your objectivity. My objectivity is that I want humanity to survive what's coming. Zara gives us the best chance. Remove me from her protection detail and you'll answer to her father directly. He'll see it as betrayal. Is that the diplomatic incident you want?" The room fell silent. Kyle had learned from Zara. Sometimes you had to force people to choose sides. "For now, you continue your assignment," Director Chen said. "But Bennett, understand this. You're representing Earth. Everything you do reflects on humanity. If you fail, if the princess dies under your protection, you'll be responsible for a diplomatic catastrophe." "I understand," Kyle said. "Is that all?" They dismissed him. Kyle left feeling drained and angry. Politics was exhausting in ways combat never was. At least in firefights, you knew who was shooting at you. He returned to the palace to find it in lockdown. Security personnel rushed through corridors. Weapons were being distributed. Something had happened. Kyle found Vorn coordinating defensive positions. "What's going on?" "Kresh fleet just entered the system," Vorn said grimly. 50 warships. They're demanding Princess Zara be turned over for trial as a war criminal. If we refuse, they'll attack." Kyle's blood ran cold. "Where's Zara?" "With her father in the command center." Kyle ran. Guards tried to stop him until they recognized his insignia. The command center was organized chaos. Tessian military officers coordinated with human advisors. Fleet positions updated in real time on massive displays. And at the center of it all, Zara stood beside her father, both staring at the incoming threat. "We can't win a direct engagement," Tharn was saying. "They have numbers and firepower advantage." "Then we don't fight directly," Zara replied. "We force them to come to us. Make them fight in our orbital defenses where our advantages matter. That means letting them threaten the capital. Millions of civilians at risk. Millions are already at risk. At least this way we can protect them." Kyle approached, and Zara noticed him immediately. Her expression shifted from commander to something softer. "Relief, maybe?" "The Kresh are early," she said unnecessarily. "We expected 2 months. They're here now." "What do you need from me?" Kyle asked. "I need you to evacuate the palace. Get the staff to shelters. The Kresh will bombard the capital if we don't surrender me." "We're not surrendering you." "Kyle, be reasonable. 1 life against millions." "No." Kyle's voice carried the absolute certainty of a soldier who'd made this decision before. "The moment we give in to terrorist demands, we lose. You taught me that. You told the entire galaxy you wouldn't back down. Keep your word." Zara stared at him. Around them, Thessian officers pretended not to listen, while obviously hanging on every word. "This is different," she said quietly. "This is my people's lives at stake. And if you surrender, those lives get used as leverage forever. The Kresh will demand more. They'll execute you publicly. They'll force the Confederacy into terms that guarantee humanity's exclusion. Everything you've worked for dies with you." Tarn was watching the exchange with his 3 eyes. The human is right. "We don't negotiate with terrorists. We never have. Starting now would destroy everything we've built." "Then what do we do?" Zara asked. "We fight," Kyle said, "and we make them regret starting this war." The Kresh gave them 1 hour to respond. Tarn used the time to contact every species in the Confederacy, making it clear this was the moment of decision. Support Thessia or accept Kresh dominance. 12 species pledged military support, 5 declared neutrality. 3 sided with the Kresh. The galaxy was choosing sides. When the deadline expired, Tharn broadcast a single-sentence response. "The Confederacy does not surrender to threats. Come and take her if you dare." The Kresh fleet advanced. Orbital defenses activated. The first shots of what would become the largest war the galaxy had seen in 3,000 years were fired. Kyle stood beside Zara in the command center, watching history unfold. She'd been right to force this confrontation. The Kresh would have attacked eventually. Better to face them now with allies than later when they'd built unstoppable momentum. "I picked you long before they sent you," Zara said quietly, repeating the words that had started everything. "Did I choose correctly?" Kyle watched the tactical displays. Human ships rushed to Thessian space in the past month. Were taking positions alongside Confederacy vessels. 2 species, barely familiar with each other, now betting their survival on partnership. "Yeah," Kyle said. "You chose correctly. Now let's prove it." The battle began in earnest. The Kresh, expecting quick capitulation, instead faced coordinated resistance. Human tactics combined with Thessian technology created combinations neither side anticipated. And in the command center, a human guard and an alien princess watched their gamble play out, knowing that whatever happened next would reshape the galaxy forever. Kyle had joined the service to make a difference. He'd succeeded beyond anything he could have imagined. The war was just beginning. But the alliance that would define humanity's place in the cosmos had already been forged. In palace corridors, through assassination attempts, Across impossible odds, a partnership had formed that would prove more powerful than either species alone. Zara had chosen correctly, and Kyle had chosen to stay. Sometimes, that was all history needed to change direction. One alien princess who trusted her instincts. One human guard who refused to give up. Together, facing the storm they'd called down on purpose, ready to fight for the future they believed was possible, the galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what they'd intended.